Well, hi everyone. Welcome to this third program of our Spring Pet series. My name is Ariane. I work for the Ottawa Public Library. And we saw during this pandemic that a lot of people were adopting pets. And this has resulted in a huge demand for pet training services, right when many training schools and facilities and pet stores are all closed because of lockdown. So the Ottawa Public Library decided to partner with Rough House, an Ottawa-based organization offering dog daycare, grooming, training, dog food, supplements, and training supplies, to offer an online a series of tips, resources, guides, and demonstration to help inform lockdown pet owners. So for today's session, the topic is going to be on training fundamentals, and we will cover topics such as what to expect when registering for your dog for training, the time and monetary investment, why should you enroll in training, the benefits, how to pick the best training and trainer for you, and so much more. We will accept chat throughout the session, a question in the chat. Jonathan will try his best to answer them all or as many as he can, depending on how many questions you have tonight. And note that a handout will be shared with you after the event with everything that was talked about today. And tonight will also be available, tonight's session will also be available on YouTube in a couple of weeks as well, if you want a reminder of what was said today then. If ever you have any questions in the chat, please, if you could write questions and call in before you write it, that will help us differentiate the questions from your wonderful comments. So without further ado, let me introduce you to this week's expert and owner of Rough House, Jonathan Sommer. Jonathan is a dog enthusiast and advocate. His dog family consists of Burley and Maybe. With 18 years of experience in sales and businesses, Jonathan shifted his focus towards his passion, which is the health and well-being of dogs and canine education. So he has received training from the Animal Behavior College as a certified dog trainer, as well as certification from the Companion Animal Science Institute in canine nutrition. Jonathan is constantly learning and is continuing studies on dog behavior and positive training technique. So please help me in welcoming the one and only Jonathan Sommer.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. We are on week 3, so welcome. And I'm not sure if any of you had joined us week 1 or week 2. But week 3 is a logical progression of where we took week 1, which was I want to look at getting a dog, so pre-ownership. Week 2 was simply I've got a dog. How do we integrate them into our home safely and properly? And week 3 is talking about training fundamentals. And we're going to dive into a lot of how to identify a trainer, what type of training there is out there for you. But it's a really diversified topic. So we're going to skim the surface this week and kind of give you as much information as we can within the hour. So as Ariane said, if you've got a direct question, just putting the word question in the chat beforehand will help us differentiate between commentary and questions. So feel free to comment or ask questions, and we're going to try and get to all of them. So thanks again for the introduction, Ariane. We're going to start out. You got your dog. You've got them into your home now. Where do you turn to go get training? And what does that training actually mean to you and your family and your dog? And that's a isolated question, but I think it's a really easy one to answer. It is very simply lifelong communication. Whether you get a puppy or you get a mature dog that you've adopted, they're still coming into your home as an outsider. Their communication is drastically different to ours. So going to fundamental training like puppy training or more advanced allows you to diversify your communication. allows you to understand your dog, and allows your dog to, more importantly, understand you. And that leads me to the second point here, is that to have a happy household, you're often going to hear the word consistency, but it enables you to communicate what you want and be an effective leader for your dog. Again, we're not talking about being a dominance figure, but if you were to communicate clearly and consistently, it allows you to be a really effective leader and avoid a lot of pitfalls we might find with inconsistency or not understanding the bridges of communication. Simply put, we don't speak puppy, and puppy doesn't speak people. So moving on to why invest, if those weren't reasons alone, you're going to see as a byproduct, whether you take a puppy classes, or private training, the byproduct you're going to see is a stable dog, one that understands what you're asking of them versus a dog that's confused. You've taken the time to bridge that communication gap between animal and person. So you're going to create a very mentally stable dog, a very healthy dog that's able to communicate back with what they need. So it's, again, the byproducts are priceless. You're going to invest in safety. By communicating boundaries effectively, you're going to help create a safe environment for your dog, whether it be teaching them not to counter surf or charge out the door before they're released into traffic, walking nicely and calling them off distractions like squirrels. Those are, again, invaluable. Allows you to go out and enjoy the world in a safe manner with your dog, which is ideally what you want to do. I mean, dogs are social. They want to get out, enjoy. The weather's great right now. I don't know a dog that wouldn't want to be outside. So enabling them with these almost like safety precautions that allow you to control situations. Again, I can't put a price tag on that. You could predict what a situation might look like as well. You've worked with your dog countless times, and we're going to go into this, but training is not a session. It is sessions. It is repetition. And again, we talk about consistency. So you're in more times often than not going to be able to predict how your dog reacts to certain dogs, to certain situations. And that predictability, again, relates right back to safety. Will they come when they're called? Will they stop at the corner? Again, those are things that we really want to invest in our dog. Again, price tag on all of those, I can't summarize more than enough. I mean, again, whether you do it at home and you've got that knowledge in-house, or you're going to professional trainers, which we'll talk about later, in classes, or taking the lessons out to the public. Again, you can't do too much training. And again, whether your dog's a puppy, it's not too young. You're never too young to start training. And your dog's never too young to be able to, to engage in training as well. So, so we'll jump into what type of training is available out there. And I see a question which we'll jump into in a moment or two, but picking the methodology in which you choose to train your dog. Now, everybody out there has probably seen a YouTube video or a TV show on dog training. And it probably might be Caesar, it might be Zach George. These trainers are obviously good at what they do in different ways, but they often give you incomplete information. So we're going to talk about the YouTube training sensation, that type of thing. But we want to approach choosing a trainer based on the methodology that they employ. And there are countless different types of approaches. But if we break it down into simple terms, we're looking at like a left and a right and a middle. Okay, so I'm going to outline those three and help you identify with which one you would want to choose and how to choose that. So if we're going left side, we're going positive reinforcement. This is often referred to as science-based training. It is teaching our dogs and teaching them to want to perform the behaviors that we want because there's a reward in it for them. We reward behavior that we seek. We avoid punishment and we avoid corrections. And this is in the far left world. Okay. It can also be referred to as proactive training. We are proactively teaching a dog what to do in a situation. Let's swing far right. We got positive reinforcement, and then we've got aversive training. Aversive training is often the old school of thinking. And there's no right or wrong. Again, I will tell you what I prescribe to, but this side is to correct the behavior that we don't want. We're going to tell our dogs with a correction, whether it's physical or verbal, that that's not what I want. And we're going to communicate that way until they do perform the behavior we do want. And this correction can often be physical, it can be uncomfortable, it can often be painful. So we look at the far right, which is positive reinforcement, no corrections. Far left, positive reinforcement. Far right, aversive training, that's only corrections. And if you're guessing here, we have a middle ground that is called balanced training. Now, if you hit right in the middle, it's a perfect blend of both. You know, you're using positive reinforcement, but you're also using corrections. And those corrections can be verbal or mild physical corrections, and still a lot of positive reinforcement. And we talked about the approaches out there. They can fade into that gray area on either side. Balanced training, that term, takes up a very big chunk of gray area. And most training is in that gray area. Aversive training, we also talk about is reactive training. Dog reacts poorly, we react with a correction. So when you're seeing trainers and the way they're approaching their training exercises, proactive versus reactive is going to give you a little bit of an idea. The way they use positive reinforcement or lack thereof correction. At the Roughhouse, and personally me as a trainer, I am almost 99% positive. I still feel that there's a world where the word no as a verbal correction is valuable as a communication tool, but at the Roughhouse, we are strictly positive reinforcement. Okay, I hope that makes sense now that we're talking about the left and the right side. So I see a couple questions I'm going to tend to here. How do you, this is from individual asking, how do you handle training a dog when two adults in the home train differently? That's tough. Two training methods can become very, very, very confusing for the dog. You may not see the results that you want because that communication is not as clear as you could have it coming from two different people. The behavior that you're looking for might also be different. So to answer your question directly, a household should want to come together and be in line with how they teach. Otherwise, it is going to be a very long haul. Again, you're not going to see the results or the learning that you want, and you're putting your dog in a compromised learning position by having two different philosophies or two different words or two different goals for that training within a household. Another question here is, how do you feel about verbal and hand signals? What works best for dogs? I'll touch on that. It's coming up, I promise. So we talked about the methodology. So that's number one. How do you want to build a relationship with your dog? And again, the aversive can build one out of fear. We find that the scientific or the positive reinforcement can build one out of reassurance and trust. That positivity, we do think that it avoids a lot of other behaviors, and it really builds a long-term bond, which I think a lot of people are looking for nowadays, where dogs are part of our family. They're sensitive creatures, and we're really looking to have that trust and that bond. But again, that is up to any dog owner to make the decision when they're seeking out a trainer. But how to choose a trainer? What methodology do they start with? Do they align with your views on how you want to train your dog? What tools do they use? So tools of a positive reinforcement trainer, there's a lot of treats and praise and reward, a collar and a leash. Pretty simply that. If you're dealing with tools like a choke chain or a prong collar, an e-collar, again, there's a lot of gray area on that right side that those can be used, but you're most likely looking at a little bit more of an aversive trainer, maybe coupled with some positive reinforcement. So what methodology and what tools are they using are going to give you a really good indication of how they train. You pick the trainer you're in line with. What are their credentials? And I'll say this is that at the Rough House, we're really proud to have myself, our lead trainer, and another person who is being mentored to be a trainer, is that we're certified. We've gone through courses, we've got our diplomas, albeit from different schools. Dog training has such a low barrier to entry that I'm a believer that you're going to want to have somebody that's invested in themselves and really understand what they're doing, from simple obedience to more complex cases. So what type of credentials do they have or certifications? What track record do they have in either running classes or dealing with certain behaviors? Almost like a case file is like, do you have success stories you can share with me about this? Or do they have references? Do they have testimonials on their website, or do they have good reviews on Google? Just do your homework and talk to them if necessary. I think you're going to get a lot out of talking to the trainer. And trust me, when you get trainers talking about training, the phone call's probably longer than you would rather want it. It's like getting somebody talking about what they're passionate about. So I see a comment there that we can touch on in a little bit. So pick your trainer with accordance with your beliefs, how you want to train your dog, and ensure that they're legit is basically what I'm saying. And there's a lot of great trainers out there, so just do your homework. What to expect with a trainer, an experienced trainer, or one that is has a lot of follow through with you, whether it be classes or private training, is going to be really important. So what to expect in a class or in private training is also really important. You're going to want somebody that communicates well with the human. A dog trainer is essentially a human trainer. Sorry, almost knocked something off the counter there. We're doing more training, unless it's a board and train or a day training session where you drop your dog off to us. We do all the training and then we let you know how to do the training. We're doing more human training than we are dog training. So you're going to want somebody that's comprehensive, that's a good communicator, and able to guide you through the steps. And the mechanics of dog training are fairly similar dog to dog. It's just having the people buy into that. You're going to want that follow through and that coaching, and how often do I train and how often do I train, and help you understand the gears around a dog's brain, whether it's a puppy or an older dog. You're going to want somebody that teaches you skills from a fundamental standpoint and then builds up your dog to more complicated things. What I mean by that is we're all in a real big hurry, me included, to get a puppy, and I get the same question all the time, or the same two questions, let's say. I've got a 4-month-old lab. He's super energetic. We go for walks. I want him to walk on a loose leash, and I'd like him to come back when I call him. Okay. That is probably the universal goal of most dog owners. And if we're talking grade school, your dog's probably at a grade 2, but you're asking us to teach him a grade 8 skill. And it's really hard to skip all those steps in between, right? It's hard to do calculus without long division. I know it's a bad analogy, but We want our foundation to be almost chronological in working our way up effectively, so the dog has this really strong base, so that this is much easier to teach, and it's bulletproof when we do teach it. So your trainer is going to understand where your dog is at with their threshold or their individual knowledge, and be able to work you along a path that makes sense for you. Understanding difficulty and distractions is something we spend a lot of time as a trainer talking to you about, and your trainer will want to really walk you through how distractions take away from the training and how they can add to it, when to add distractions and when to take a step back. And I think that guidance is really invaluable to you, almost real time. So when you're working with a private trainer or in a class, that feedback where they're able to show you real time what's going on or describe a situation, again, they should be able to jump in and give you feedback, how to change your training or make it more effective. So I've got a comment here. We're looking pretty good for time, so I'm gonna jump in here about a comment from a rescue dog from Mexico. She's been living with my sister there until they moved back to Canada. The dog is about 4 years old and lived in an open concept shelter her whole life. No cages, interacting with many dogs, wondering how to handle nervous, submissive peeing in the house. She has also specifically peed directly on human beds a few times when unsupervised. I won't dive too deep into that because it does touch on some behavior issues versus obedience. And given some time to settle in, last week we talked about a dog being in a house for 3 days, feeling out the situation. 3 weeks, testing their boundaries, getting more comfortable, and then 3 months being completely comfortable in their surroundings. If it goes beyond that 3-month mark, we're going to dive into the behavior aspect versus the obedience. So we're going to talk about the difference between those trainers. So hopefully that will help. So should you do class training or private training? There's no wrong answers. There's pros and cons to each. The biggest question, though, that I have about class training is that it's not for every dog. Overstimulation is a major issue when you get a young dog or even an old dog around a few others. It's excitement, it can be reactivity, and we often lump that into a term called overstimulated. And what does that look like? It looks like it could be stress, it can be panting, where essentially your dog shuts down and doesn't want to do any training with you. Their hunger shuts off, their scent shuts off. Those are the two major tools we're going to use in positive reinforcement. Good sign they're overstimulated. They are restless. They would bark the entire time. They might lunge. Those are situations where group classes aren't effective for you and your dog. Not only that, it'll probably disrupt the class for everybody else in there. So what we would do here is we would likely suggest private training because that's the best situation for you and your dog. Now, a lot of dogs do great in training classes. And what that does provide you is those distractions that are hard to duplicate day to day. It allows you to practice skills 10 feet away from another dog that really cement those cues or those behaviors that you're looking for. So it's really hard to replicate that scenario. Can't really predict if there's going to be 8-10 dogs out when you go for a walk on Sunday. So those group classes are really good to take advantage of that. And again, you're getting real-time feedback. You often get homework and exercises. So that curriculum is designed to see your dog through, again, grade 1 up and through grade 8, 9, 10, and then ultimately graduate into a great dog. Private training, though, when that is your preference or necessity, again, they're tailored towards you and your dog. And that's the advantage there. You likely get a lot more one-on-one feedback, direct feedback from the trainer to you, because you're the only person with them, and a much more tailored curriculum to overcome some of your dog's hurdles if you're in a private session for a reason. So both are really, really effective. And again, a comprehensive trainer should be able to give you constant feedback and then a plan moving forward. The thing with a plan, and I've seen this over and over again with people, and they come in and they're at their wits' end with their dog. And it could really be as simple as pulling on leash, or losing it when they see a squirrel, or lunging at cars. And that frustration can be overwhelming when you don't have a direction, or you don't have exercises, or there's not a path or a plan. So when you have that plan, it takes away that hopelessness and it gives you something to work on. So that a private trainer or a class session can really give that to you. As I talked before, there's value in having all this dog content out on YouTube. Just be careful with what trainer you choose. Again, be careful to assess what they're offering you. Piecemeal training often is really difficult because, again, you're not getting a comprehensive curriculum. And they have creative editing. I mean, I'm a fan of dog TV because it interests me, but I'm also aware they bring a dog trainer in and Caesar goes in and uses his correction techniques in half an hour, he's fixed the dog. That's not likely the case. And I think we just have to be realistic about that information that's floating out there. These people bring a lot of great awareness to dog training, but let's be realistic, okay? Having a look here, get another comment, but I'm just going to drive forward here and we might get a chance to touch on that a little bit later from Lori. Hope you guys are still hanging in there. What tools do you need as a trainer? I think we covered these, but I think some of them might surprise you. Treats, rewards. Treats are the easiest thing to identify as a reward. Most dogs remain hungry all the time. You could probably fill up their bowl once and they try to convince you that they hadn't eaten the first one. So puppies, dogs, they're motivated by food, okay? But there's other things your dogs identify as rewards. Your dog loves praise, likely. They get excited by that. Their tail wags. They love ear scratches. Other things we might not think of as rewards are getting up on the couch for good behavior. It's important to look at rewards not just as food, but treats are the major tool we're going to use as training, and multiple types of treats. And this is when we go through every class is at least 3 different types of treats. We talked about finding ways to communicate with our dog that aren't verbal. Again, we're going to touch on the physical communication, but you can communicate with the type of reward or the amount of reward. So when I say different types of treats, you can bring kibble as part of their dinner. You can bring a mid reward that's like maybe a chicken or beef liver, and then you can bring a hot dog or some cheese. Every dog's different, but there's a hierarchy of treats. And guess what? If they do an okay job, you can give them the kibble. If they do a pretty good job, they're gonna get the beef liver. But when they hit it out of the park, they ignore the dog beside them and their entire attention is set on you, they get the cheese. So the type of treat communicates how well they did and their desire to perform that well again. The amount also matters. In training, we've got something called jackpotting. So if you didn't have multiple treats, you could say, you know what, you did an amazing job. You got 4 treats instead of 1. And again, that will increase the dog's awareness of what I did there, generated 4 treats. I want to do that again. So amount and type of treat are excellent communication sources. You're going to need a treat pouch or lots of pockets. Doing training, I learned pretty quickly that a multi-pocket treat pouch is super valuable. And if not, just empty your pockets before the wash. Lots of wash dog treats in my house. You're going to need a collar and a leash. And I'm going to take a few minutes on this one because it's an interesting one because there's so many options out there. A collar, options for a collar. In positive training, positive reinforcement training on that far left of our scale, there's no need for any situation that would create an uncomfortable sensation. Prong collars, choke chains, anything along those lines, we don't really need. We need a collar that fits snug so our dog is safe. And how do you fit a collar that is, say, a latch collar or a buckle collar? Is we've got, as a puppy, if you can put one finger and just kind of roll it around, you've got enough room in there that's comforting, not too tight, but also not too loose for safety reasons. As a dog gets bigger, your dog's getting to 40, 50, 60 pounds, you might want a 2-finger rule where you can just roll your fingers and maneuver underneath the collar, but anything more than that is too loose. We run the risk of them popping out of the collar, especially when we're in a busy area. So for safety reasons, you want to fit those properly. The same rule would apply for a harness. As a puppy, they're smaller, you're going to want 1 finger, and as you harness, you're going to want to be able to rotate 2 fingers to know that we're not putting them in an uncomfortable situation, but it's still safe. So those are really key. We see at least one puppy every class pops out of their harness or pops out of their collar, and some harnesses are better than others. So that would be a discussion for another time, is what's most secure. And some dogs just have the Houdini gene. They can get out of anything. So my recommendation coming to class would be a 6-foot leash, a fixed leash, something that is solid, that's secure. There's so many good leashes out there. I'm just not a big supporter of flexi leads. If you're not familiar, flexi leads are the invention of those retractable leashes. So you can have a 2-foot lock, you can let dog run wild up to 20 feet, or you can have a 6-foot locked leash. If you're coming to class and that's all you have, my suggestion again is to lock in at 6 feet. There's much less maneuverability with those. That's the number one reason I don't like them. Number 2, they're unpredictable. It's because as an owner, we're not in tune with the length we give our dogs. What I mean by that is a fixed leash always has 6 feet. So our dog knows where the end of the leash is. It's consistent and clear. They know that they're dealing with. Now, if we go to a flexi lead, sometimes they let me on a 20-foot lead. Sometimes they let me on 15. Sometimes they let me on 10. Now I'm stuck at 2. There's not a consistent conversation happening with that leash and the dog, unless that owner is very in tune. So from a consistency standpoint, I just highly recommend a fixed leash. Lastly, to enhance communication, some of you may have heard of a tool called a clicker. I wish I could say who's heard of it and hands up. And so a clicker is a little tool that you have that makes the same sound every time you click it. Okay, so there's a lot of arguments for this. And I'm going to dive into it again a little bit later. We're going to revisit the tool as a clicker and why you might want to consider it as a trainer. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a question here. Let's see what we got. How much treats can we give per day? Really great question. Of course, treats are richer in nature than dog kibble. So smaller is better. And when I say that, your sessions are better smaller, and there is such a thing as overtraining. You're going to be able to see it in your dog. They lose interest. You just don't want to perform, or that treat is just not enticing anymore. Or as a puppy, you might see them getting a little bit more of a loose stool situation. So the treats that you feed your dog, you can kind of discount them from their meal, or if they're really, really into training or their kibble, you can use their kibble and just feed them a little bit less. But I think it's a judgment call. Again, most puppies aren't going to become overweight, especially if you're using really small treats. There's a few options out there that are awesome that they pre-cut these treats into these tiny little pieces. So your dog's getting a reward, but it's not overloading them from a digestive standpoint, if that makes any sense. So, got a question. How do we get the dog to heel? Well, that one's a tough one. That would, and I'm going to say this kind of harkening back to doing grade 1, 2, and 3, and making sure our dogs understand what's expected, and then teaching him that behavior. But if we can't do 1 and 2 or grade 3, that heel is going to become much more difficult. So that is an advanced behavior, but there's certain methods that we require the skills learned in grade 1 and grade 2 and grade 3 to teach that heel. So definitely attainable. As mentioned, that's like one of the #1 things we get asked, along with recall. Do your preschool, do your grade 1, grade 2, we'll get you to the heel. #1 thing in that, I guess, is being able to ignore the distractions around you, because ultimately that's what's happening. If your dog can't focus on you and ignore the distractions, which we work on in those first 3 grades, it's really hard to ask them to do that in any situation where they're going to walk beside you. All right, so we're jumping into some of the training fundamentals. I'm calling it communication and consistency. So this is where we're going to talk about communication types. And we had a question earlier about what do I think about physical cues or verbal cues? And I think they're both important. It increases our avenue of communication. It becomes much clearer what we're asking for. And for those of you out there, if there's a question around that, we pair a physical cue with a verbal cue to communicate clearer to our puppies. So some of the most common verbal and physical cues out there would be to raise a hand up if you want your dog to sit, or put your hand palm down if you want your dog to do a down. Pairing those together really does help, especially when you get into some of the other skills like recall. Recall is done at a distance. And sometimes at a distance, your voice might not carry over, but if your dog can see you, a physical cue can stand in for that verbal cue. #2, I don't expect this to happen in a lot of households, but I had a dog that I adopted probably about 12 years ago. She passed a couple of years back, but her last few years of life, she actually lost her hearing. So physical cues and body language are our major forms of communication. So it was a great question. I'm a big believer in both. Body language I just spoke about, it communicates a lot to the dog and vice versa. That topic can go so deep about body language from the dog and what they're trying to say to you. It does pay to learn your dog and start to associate their body language with what they're trying to tell you. Just learning basic body language. What does their tail mean? What are their ears? What are their eyes? What does their mouth mean in certain situations is really valuable. And oftentimes your dog is looking at you, trying to mimic your behavior too, trying to tell you something. Eye contact. Believe it or not, this is probably the #1 obedience cue that I encourage you to teach your dog to do on cue. Look at you. You can call it look, you can call it look at me, you can call it focus, you can add a hand cue to it. Everything we do in obedience training is for our dog to have self-control. And it's really hard for our dog to have self-control when they're looking at the object or the item or the situation that excites them. So starting at a very young age, this is an unnatural thing for a lot of puppies, but dogs don't necessarily like to engage in eye-to-eye contact to start. It's intimidating. It can also be challenging. But when you're doing positive reinforcement training, that bond happens. That eye-to-eye contact is such a major control mechanism for you to get into those things like loose leash walking or heel, recall, anything like that. So eye contact is invaluable and rewarding for that. Start at a young age. your voice along with the words, you can add so much meaning to it with your tone, your inflection, the volume. Dogs get that. They get that excitement tone, that cartoon voice when you're, yay, good dog. They get really excited about that. And you're communicating to them, you're excited for them. You did something that I wanted. Um, or you can express urgency, and they're very sensitive to volume. So all of these things help in that communication. Like if you really needed your dog to stop and listen, volume might help. But keep in mind, again, they're very sensitive to that, and can often alert them or scare them, especially if it's in the house. Consistency. It's terrible because I'm not a weightlifter, but I'm going to use let's call it a gym analogy, or a running analogy. So the question about, can I get my dog to loose leash, walk, or heel? Well, there's a few things that we need to do. We need to start at ground one and start building consistency. The question earlier is, everybody in the household has to have the same goal and the same communication style. So we need to keep going to the gym if we want to get stronger. Your dog needs to keep training if they want to get better at ignoring these distractions and having self-control, implementing impulse control. We need to repeat this. Again, we need more reps. We need to continually do reps. And those reps need to get harder if I want to get stronger, or I want to run longer. So I do enough reps at 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers. It's time to try to push for 5. Same thing with weights. I did 100 pounds. I want to go 120 pounds. You're not going to get there without consistency, repetitions, and increasing the difficulty. And in dog training, increasing the difficulty is introducing distractions that really tempt your dog and test their impulse control. And using distance is a major training tool. You'll learn a word that's called threshold. And those of you that have dogs right now have probably seen a scenario out there where distance in itself tells you where your dog's threshold is. And what that means is, I hit a point when my dog completely loses it and he cannot ignore that person or that other dog. But up until that point, I could get their attention with a treat. We call that going over threshold. So we need to train right on that line. That's right where we're getting our gain. So understanding distance and difficulty is where a trainer can really help you. Lastly, we need motivation. We need to keep this thing fun. We need to see progress. We need to tell our dog it's fun. We need to get them excited for these sessions. And oftentimes we forget that. They need to be motivated too. So whatever you're doing, mix it up, keep it fresh, and keep your dog motivated. Different treats, different scenario, different challenges, and don't get deterred. It's the long game here. And when you're doing positive reinforcement, you're not going to see overnight changes, but you're going to see these gradual changes that really impress you. All right, so I've got a comment here. Friend has a problem, was from Lori. A friend has a problem with her dog, wants to run when she approaches them outside and they get away. I guess the dog likes to be chased. What is the best way to get the dog to come on command without her enticing the dog with treats or to come back? Great question. It's a game. A lot of dogs like to be chased, and they learn how to get that done. What you're asking is, how do we train recall? And to be honest, where it's at right now is the dog probably has too much freedom. If the dog doesn't have recall, it probably shouldn't be off leash. And if he's off leash in the backyard and is really trying to manipulate the owner to chase them, don't engage in the game. Where you want to engage is putting a long lead on them and training that behavior. The more value they get out of you chasing them, the less likely they are to come back on command. So again, you're going to need to put restrictions in place about the freedom the dog gets. And you're going to need to do what we talked about a second ago, is start small. Think about it as going to the gym and start with tiny little recalls. Keep it consistent, keep it controlled, motivate your dog, and don't allow those games to happen. Like you said, the more they happen, the harder recall is to be taught. So really good question. Again, the mechanics of that's probably not enough time here today to talk about them, but again, recall is one of those grade 8, 9, 10, or 11 skills that, you know, when we have strong fundamentals, that's going to be much easier for us to teach. Cool. So basics of training. We start with shaping. Pardon me. Shaping or luring a dog is the number one thing we do, because this is where we're starting from ground zero. There's no communication built yet. But your dog's strongest sense is their nose. So as an easy example, when we go to shape a dog, we're going to show this next week as a demonstration. We put a treat very close to their nose between our finger and our forefinger and our thumb. We get our dog to follow us, and we can manipulate their physical position depending where their head goes and their nose goes. So if we want to teach them how to sit, we raise the treat up in front of their nose, their head goes up, their bum goes down, and we get a sit. So the first thing that we need to understand about the basics is how to lure. Don't go too fast, too slow. That treat needs to stay attached to the dog. Like I tell all our students, if your fingers are covered in slobber, you're doing it right. Okay. Handling, using the leash as a guidance tool, not a punishment tool. And really getting a feel for that. And again, it's a communication tool, but we're using this more to guide our dogs into a position than we are correcting them for not getting in that position. And how to be able to change hands with that leash, whether it's learning a heel, you're often doing that behind your back, or just hand to hand. Reward, choosing the right rewards. Know your dog. Not every dog likes cheese or hot dog. Most of them do, but find the treats that do work for you. And again, grade those out. Have a hierarchy of treats for your dog. Understand what a marker is. So earlier I talked to you about what I thought the most important thing that you can teach your dog is eye contact, because it's the basis for all other obedience cues. If your dog is paying attention to you, you have the floor to dictate which command or cue comes next. So I firmly believe, even though that's not a really sexy skill to have, it's a core foundation skill. As a trainer, the biggest skill, if you go home, and I say this to everybody that has one of our classes, our courses, private training sessions, including this webinar, if you went home and said, you know, the number one thing I need to keep in mind is how I provide feedback to my dog. And that's called a marker. So your marker might already be good boy, good girl, okay? Timing. When do you issue that marker tells your dog that that's what you were looking for. Your dog already knows that good boy means a reward or good girl means a reward. So if your timing is exact, you're looking to teach your dog how to look at you, they look you in the eyes and you say, good boy, right when they look at you, that marker is more important than when you deliver that reward. The reward can wait 2, 3, 4 seconds. So if you don't have the treat in your hand or you're not ready, that marker is still really important. Your marker can be anything you want. It can be in any language, it can be any word, but again, it has to be consistent. So keeping with the theme that this is the most important thing that you can do, if you're not on time, your dog looks at you, looks away, and you say, good boy, you're actually marking the behavior you don't want. So to expedite learning, you have to be 100% present and really nail that timing until your dog knows the skill. When you're teaching him something new, that timing is critical. And your household should pick one particular word, one consistent word, and go with that. Now, I'm going to revisit something we talked about. It was the clicker. So the clicker is a mechanism that generates a sound. This sound is the same every time you click. I should have come prepared and had a clicker up at the counter here, but you can Google it and, or YouTube it, and you'll see if you're not familiar. It's a handheld item. You can put it usually on a little elastic that's on your wrist, so it's always with you. And this can be your marker. Now, this is science-based. This is not my opinion. It's been proven that this clicker can be highly effective in training dogs to do things super quickly. Why is that? Well, everybody in the house uses a clicker. The clicker's the same sound. We don't have to decide on a word. We just have to get the timing right. We don't have to worry about inflection of voice, volume, tone. And again, we don't have to worry about getting the word right. This clicker is everything. So it aids as a consistency tool, and it's so much more accurate. If you think about versus good boy, you've got a fraction of a second and a 2-second statement. So the accuracy of the clicker again, and the timing and how you communicate is really, really pinpointed. So I've heard it compared to verbal marker as a butter knife, clicker as a scalpel. I hope that makes sense to you guys as far as the explanation goes if you're unfamiliar with clickers. Diving into our last section here as we kind of round out the discussion is, do you require different training for different dogs? That is a very tricky question, but what I would say to that is universally, you can approach all dogs with any of the methodologies we spoke about. I think that the aversive technique can really have a negative impact on really shy dogs or dogs that have been abused or soft dogs, as we call them. So I really feel that the umbrella of positive reinforcement and scientific-based training really holds a lot more pros in that. I would approach that with a puppy through to a dog that's been shy, abused. So it checks a lot more boxes, a heck of a lot more. But something to keep in mind is the DNA of your dog. So if you've got a particular breed, let's say you got a beagle, let's anticipate that loose leash walking or that heel is going to be extra difficult, because guess what? That nose is going to be attached to the ground and it's going to be running you wherever that smell goes. So we're going to have to work extra hard at ignoring that impulse because your dog's a beagle. If you got a doodle, doodles are everywhere. They're bred with poodles. Poodles are hunting dogs. They typically have a high prey drive. We're going to have to expect that our dogs might get extra excited when they see those squirrels or chipmunks running around. So keeping in mind what your dog was bred for also might come into key about expecting some of the training challenges you might face. The difference between obedience versus behavioral. Obedience are foundational skills for day-to-day training. Okay, so that would be like useful things like a potty cue. Go to the bathroom on command. Awesome cue for the wintertime. You don't understand, teach your dog the potty cue. You won't have to stand outside -30. Go to bed cue. It's great for having them behave when strangers come over, guests. When the doorbell rings, having a spot for them to go on cue. We talked about heel. We all want to go for a walk without being pulled down the street. Recall. These are all obedience cues. Behavior issues. If you're falling under this category, you're likely going to be addressing a particular issue or issues. And this requires a much more accredited and experienced dog trainer, often referred to as behaviorists or dog psychologists. And their credentials should be as such. But some of the things that we often see They're not limited to these things, but these are often private sessions or one-on-one plans that specifically cater to an individual dog, but leash reactivity. My dog is leash reactive, meaning we put the leash on, he lunges, barks, and becomes the demon when he sees like another dog or people. We need a behaviorist to tend to that. Aggression, there's a huge difference between reactivity and aggression, but they're often lumped under the same umbrella. But if your dog's aggressive, we need to seek a specialist, somebody that's dealt with dog aggression. Could be other things like resource guarding, separation anxiety, which is huge right now because nobody's going to work. Once the bell sounds and we go back to somewhat normal and a lot of people return to the office or the workspace, these dogs have not been taught to, they haven't been equipped with the skills to be at home alone. It's going to be a major issue. Fear as well. If your dog's overly fearful, we have to look at a plan to put them back together, to build confidence. So you're looking at those as behavior issues versus things that we want them to teach to perform on cue or help us day to day. So how do you choose a behaviorist? Exactly the same as a trainer. Again, be aware. There's a lot of self-proclaimed experts out there. There's a lot of people that say they specialize, but we really want to go into what methodology do they use? Does it align with your methodology and your outlook on training dogs? What tools do they use? Do they use e-collars that shock your dog's neck? Or do we use positive reinforcement? Are they specialized? You often see people that are specialized in these behaviors, like a separation anxiety expert or an aggression expert. What are the credentials? What's their track record? What's their testimonials, reviews? Choose that behaviorist slowly and you'll see results. Don't rush into it. Have a good chat with them and really assess. Interview that trainer if you have specific needs you want to deal with. That rounds us out here, 7:58. I'm about 3 minutes off. Are there any questions out there, Ariane, that I didn't touch on or I might be able to?
No, you were pretty good at following most of them. Exactly. I didn't see, I've read a lot of comments from people. Thank you so much for your participation today for sure. And yeah, and the last one was how do you build a prey drive for GSD? But other than that, everything.
Listen, prey drive can be taught, and it can be worked on as well. If it's inherent, you may want to work on it, or if you really want to build prey drive, you'll talk to a trainer about starting off small and in building that into a program where we reward them for going after things in particular that we want them to.
So if there's no other questions, we keep an eye on the chat if there's anything very last minute. But we can conclude for today's session. Thank you very much to Rough House for partnering with us for this amazing series. You've been with us for 3 weeks now. A very special thank you to you specifically, Jonathan.
My pleasure.
If you missed thank you. If you missed the beginning of the program, I know I've heard we had a little bit of issues connecting and with the link for some of you. Note that we will be sending the handouts with today's information at the end of this program by email. And we will also have this whole session recorded on our YouTube channel, on the Ottawa Public Library's channel in a couple of weeks as well. So you'll be able to catch the beginning of this session as well if you'd like to. We hope you have enjoyed the program. Hope we have found it informative and useful. The next and last program of this spring series will be this Friday, actually, only in 2 days, May 21st. and it's going to be at 4:30 p.m. So a little early during the day on Zoom as well. And it's because it's earlier because it's going to be open to the whole family. So if you do have kids or just want to participate in it, you are all welcome. You can bring your dogs as well to this workshop, because that's going to be, we're going to teach you basically and give you demonstration uh, with the content, summarizing the content of the first 3 sessions basically, but in demonstration. So showing you a little bit how to handle the dog and prep them for grooming or get them used to it. How to react to certain situation, fun brain games, training tricks. So all of those will be there Friday, and we hope to see you. We're also expecting to have a fall series. It's in the making. It's still not confirmed yet, but keep your eyes out for this fall series, which will go with which will delve a little deeper in the subject, and maybe we'll talk about maybe more things like pets first aid, clothing and accessories, and a lot more. So we hope to see you then. Until then, until Friday, if you're there, or the fall, take care of yourself, everyone, and take care of your family, your furry friends, and bye, everyone. Have a nice evening. Thank you again, John.